So this time I'm going to be showing you the settings I use for when I scan artwork in. Now, a lot of the times people I've read say not to use the scanning that's in Photoshop, but I'll show you what comes with the scanner I have, which is a Canon. It's got the number right there. When I go into scan, it gives me very few options, and I have never been able to find out how I can expand that. So I just don't use it really. You see, there's no PNG here, and that's what I like to scan in. I think it gives a good quality image. So I just don't scan in it at all. So some people say you should, some don't. So what I use is Photoshop Elements 8 actually to scan with. Now it brings up this, and now you see there's the whole glass cover, or it can auto to the size of the image that it sees when it scans, or color, or grayscale, or black and white, all the way up to the highest resolution. I always scan in at 600 when it's artwork. When it's just text or a document, I do it like at 150. Now I don't have it set to do any extra sharpening or contrasting or anything in the picture. I want it as plain as it can be. This is a sketch. Now I'm doing it as color because I always prefer to remove the color later in Photoshop if I need to. I don't like it to do the choice for me. Now this is a bad example, but this is just the last sketch I've been working on, and it's still in my sketchbook. When I scan, I always scan flat. So when you're scanning in from a book, this is what you're going to get. No matter how hard I try and flatten out the book or put pressure on the top of my scanner, you're going to get that gray area where it's just not flat against it. So I don't suggest doing that, honestly. It's not the best way to go. I actually, when I was in college, always worked in the graphics labs because I like to be a helper there, because then I could actually have access to all the tools there all of the time. And they would have huge scanners, so it didn't matter the size of the artwork because it would always fit. Now, I'll just kind of quickly show you on this as an example scan of what I do. So first go in and rotate it the way it should be. Now, the reason it wasn't is, of course, the orientation of the book and where I have my scanner, so always can rotate, don't worry about that. Now I go in and save it as a 600 DPI PNG. That's just what I prefer to scan in to the different things you can do. There's all these autos, which I don't do for artwork. Only for pictures do I bother using the auto, because it will do the color correction. But for scanned in drawings, I always edit it by myself with what I think is best. Now, I generally use levels, and you can kind of see here how dramatic they can get. Generally, I bring the black arrow to the beginning of the spike that's starting to go upwards, and then I bring the white to the beginning of the spike on the right side, or just a little further in sometimes. We'll get a better result. Again, this is not a great example because of the gray over there on the side. I just wanted to show you kind of what I use, and here I'll quick use something I've already scanned in to show you how you can fix those things in a minute. If you're going to scan this from a book and you couldn't tear the image out, you see you're going to get this strange pixelation. You would need to scan it in parts and then compile it all together, which is something I've done on my scanner because it's very small. But I'll just show you on this other picture here, the original scan I have of it. You can see how it's very dirty over here on the side. And just going a little closer, you can see the texture of the paper and all those things, which is usually not what you want to have for a finished image if you're trying to put it in a portfolio or anything like that. Again, this is just a sketch, so generally I would go in and ink it on my computer later, but if you really were wanting to keep the sketch as a sketch, you would need to go in and clean all of this up pretty heavily. So here we are at the levels. I'll just kind of show you what it can do, what settings start to give a better result. You can see the page start to disappear a little. There's less of the paper finish there. You can see the texture. Things starting to get a little extreme there. You're starting to lose a bit of the sketchiness. You can see it's a little dark. It almost looks like an ink sketch now versus pencils, so it's a little far. So let's go back and I'll maybe try to fix it a little better. So that's starting to look a little more like it's still a pencil sketch, but yet you're getting rid of the texture of the paper and the back. Now, you're still having a lot of these big gray areas. So what are you going to do about that? Well, there's two ways of doing it. There's erasing. Erasing is okay, but it's pretty permanent, and I don't always use this unless it's just like an ink image and I'm getting rid of a speck on the page. That's pretty obvious that I want to get rid of one little speck. But when you're doing a sketch, there's so many little lines that can be important that erasing can leave you in a bit of a pickle if you can't go back and Control Z a long ways away when you realize, oh crap, I had actually erased an important line there. Where if you make another layer that's white and then draw over those lines, you can go back and clean them up later in case you realize, hey, I accidentally overstepped on a line that I really want showing now. So this is generally how I go through and try to clean up a picture, when it's especially a sketch. Now here's just an example of having gone over important lines that you probably will want to have back later. Now, because it's just on a new layer with white, I can go in then and erase back the line to give it back the line that I think it should have had. And if you don't think you're getting the right line, you can always do the opacity to see through it a bit and bring back the line to what you think it should be. And you can just keep doing this over and over and over again until you get what you want. And for a sketch, I think it's the best option. And that's usually how I do it. And whenever I'm scanning, I always scan in at 600 dpi. But here I'll show you sort of what I do for keeping track of which pictures are which. Some of you might have already figured it out. It's not certainly difficult to understand. But here we have just some of my more latest sketches, and so I scan things in and I always save it as a description word and then 600. So then I always know that that was my 600, or I leave it as lines or sketch so I know that I'm looking at the sketch, not my finished lines. So that's about it. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next week.